Welcome back, it's OG again. Surprise! I made another Kerbals video. Only you're probably not surprised because you saw the thumb link and the title when you clicked on it. Unless YouTube just was in autoplay and it played it on from whatever you were watching before. But I'm rambling. This is an Eeloo rocket. I want to go to Eeloo again and I want to do a return mission. So this is what I built to do the job. It's a modified version of a rocket I used to build a space station. So it has a rather unique first stage, really strange engine configuration, which factors into the video a little bit later, as you will see. I chose Eeloo because I did a test of 0.1.5.0 not long ago, but it was a fairly simple test, and even though it wasn't successful, I thought I really wanted to push 0.1.5.0 and see the limits, see what it behaves like in the edge cases, the difficult missions. Hence a return mission to Eeloo. First thing I found was that the wobbly rocket thing is still so bad. Now, I did mention this in my last video, the quick test of 0.1.5.0. There's got to be a quicker way to say that. Patch 5. Quick test of patch 5. But whereas in that patch it was just annoying, in this patch, in this video, it's downright dangerous. To the point that I didn't think I would actually be able to succeed. However, I kept on going until my SRBs ran out, at which point I staged, completely forgetting that on this rocket the SRBs are an integrated part of the lower stage and you cannot stage them off. So that was my fault, and you will see throughout this video quite a few things are my fault, but quite a few more are the game's fault. This crash, my fault. That one is on me. Okay, another launch. I remembered to strut the really wobbly parts of the rocket this time. Unfortunately, during that procedure, somehow other parts became unstrutted. I'm going to call my fault on that too. It's probably something I changed, but that whole nose cone and top assembly started coming apart. All on me. I made the gravity turn. I was scared. It was a sharp turn. I didn't know if the whole rocket would hold together, especially since I started at fairly low altitude for such a long rocket. But to its credit, it did. Staging went well. Now we have finally gotten rid of the first stage. Burning on the second stage. Things going relatively well. Now, what I want to do is meet up with another spacecraft in orbit. A long time ago, I made a video about a space station. Okay, this rendezvous took a while. I put a series of vessels in orbit and let them meet up at a space station, which is a refueling dock, which I put there for a future space mission which never happened. Only now it is happening. I decided today I would use one of these vessels. This is the space station, and each one of these balls is a vessel. A huge hydrogen tank with a very efficient engine attached to it. And since I was doing an Eeloo mission, I thought what better time than to finally use one of these vessels. So I undocked one with the aim of docking it with my rocket, which has been designed to dock with this thing. Even if it doesn't look like it, it has, I promise. Okay, I won't really show the detail, but unfortunately I undocked the wrong one. It was an empty one, so I had to undock another one. This one actually had fuel in it. Okay, now if I thought it was hard to rendezvous with the space station itself, now I actually had to dock. And that is a whole different problem. You can see the spaceship, the rocket up ahead there, coming into view over the top of the big ball engine. I think I called them Orbitanks. Ahead of the Orbitank rocket section. Note that this rocket is flown by an outboard little Kerbal sitting on a chair. There is no place on the space station for them, so they sit there on the tanks. He's been sitting there a few months in space. Don't worry about him. It's just Bill. He's fine. This is the docking procedure. Neither of these vessels are particularly maneuverable. It's one of these, will I actually be able to get this right at all scenarios. But luck was on my side, and eventually I did almost sort of get it right. Gently does it. If I didn't have so many RCS thrusters on it, it would never have been possible. As you can see, there's a sort of an overlap. You know, this game. The overlap, that's not on me. That's the game's fault. And then I could not get Bill out of his seat. Because, and this is uncharacteristic of me, I actually made provision in the rocket for a little crew cabin for extra crew. I thought I could actually take Bill along inside in comfort. But it turns out I couldn't get him out of that chair because, I don't know, the rocket's in the way. The overlap doesn't play nicely. Something doesn't work. So sorry, Bill, you're going to be strapped onto the outside of a rocket for a ride out to the most distant planet in the Kerbola system. Right, so the next step was to get the orbit raised. The idea behind raising the orbit and circularizing it is so that I can time warp faster, because there's a time warp limit and I need to get Eeloo into the right position before I start the transfer out to Eeloo. So I raised the Apo up to 1000 kilometers, and then I followed up with the periapsis. I don't really like the nuclear-fueled engines much, but I must say with this huge tank, they do actually have utility. They kind of work. Otherwise, with the other tanks, the tanks are too thin and your rocket becomes too long. And the amount of fuel doesn't really pay off. Alright, so what I need to do now is get my planet into a position from whence I can transfer out to Eeloo. This is where the my faults come into it again. Okay, wait, this fault. This was actually an interesting one. It wouldn't let me maneuver because it said I was out of fuel. And that is because I linked up with this rocket. And that engine for that rocket then appeared in the top stage. So I had to reorder the engines and things in the stages before it would register that I had a fueled rocket that was active. That's kind of stupid, but that's just how it works. Not the worst problem I encountered. Okay, so this little error of mine is that I allowed the planet to go too far. Too far in its orbit around the sun. I should have gone around again, just waited another year. Not a big thing with time warp, but I didn't. I got a bit lazy. And I couldn't get a good intercept, so I decided on this really dumb strategy of going out to an orbit beyond Dres and sort of just waiting out there a bit to let Eeloo sort of pass and then meet up with it later. Okay, I made some really, really, really bad orbital choice decisions throughout this game. I will admit to that. Here's me making an even worse one. I'm looking for an intercept. There isn't a great one yet, so I'm trying to force something. which necessitates me making this long elliptical orbit that goes way beyond the furthest point of Eeloo's orbit. All in the name of being too lazy just to do a proper orbit in the first place. But anyway, that's what I did, and theoretically it can work. And with this rocket, with the amount of delta V it has, it should be able to work. Now I'm just burning to get the angle of the orbit aligned with Eeloo's strange angle. And then it's a matter of waiting a very long time to meet up with the planet. Something like a decade. Thank heavens for time warp. A couple of correction burns along the way as necessary, of course. With such a long orbit, that is very necessary. There you can see we actually had an intercept from quite far away too. I'm good at that, I have to say. It's one of the things I do well, get really good intercepts from far out. Now if only they would work in practice. If only the burns could be as accurate. Oh, this burn time is still annoying. This was kind of amusing. Look how far I am from the nearest planet. And it begins stopping the time warp due to the distance from the nearest planet, which is mildly hilarious. Limited due to proximity of celestial body. I am hundreds of millions of kilometers away from the closest celestial body. Another thing which remains a big problem is trying to click on the right line for your time warp, where you have these multiple orbits displayed, your current one and your next one, and then if you click on the wrong line, you're just going to carry on orbiting around. And that, combined with the problem where time warps wouldn't stop when you hit an SOI, they make us very tricky. Now I maintain that the further you get out in the solar system, or Kabola system, the more buggy the game gets. And I'm going to demonstrate that. And this game was no exception. Compared to my one the other day where I just went to the moon, this was a horror show. And as we progressed, the errors became less and less mine, and more the game's. Now up to this point, things have gone okay. More or less according to plan. Despite the tricky rendezvous, things are going okay. I still have a lot of fuel. Note, I have an orbital velocity of 2,756 meters a second and a delta V of almost 900 left in this big hydrogen tank. So I should be able to get the orbital velocity way below 2,000, even though I'm not quite at periapsis yet. That's the theory. And then I've got like almost the entire rocket left over with which to burn the rest. Okay, so yeah, I'm starting the burn. Now note, the orbital velocity is dropping at 2,752, 2,751, and on the other side my fuel is starting to drop. But now our time warp. Have a look during the time warp. The fuel is dropping, but the velocity isn't. And critically, I didn't pick this up. All I was looking for, and what I normally look at in this case, is how much delta V I have left in that stage, how much fuel I have left in that stage. And when it's done, I stage it and I carry on until things start to look right. I was not noting the orbital velocity. So with a change of 8 meters per second instead of almost 900, I ejected the hydrogen tank. I brought it all this way for nothing. Okay, then this left me with an interesting immediate problem. I still had Bill on there. Was I going to leave Bill behind? Now, it's only in my Starfield playthroughs that I'm an absolute psychopath. Here, I just don't normally mind killing Kerbals, but I don't go out of my way to kill them. So I made an effort to save Bill. I ejected the rocket in front, and lo and behold, I managed to get Bill out of his chair. So now he's floating in distant space out by the furthest planet in the system, but he has a jetpack. And after a little refamiliarization of how to jetpack in KSP2, I got him to the lander module, mistakenly believing that there were 2 chairs in the lander module. Because, yeah, I haven't played for a while. And that's the game's fault, not mine. I thought I pressed the wrong button at first when I told him to board, and he just drifted off. So I tried again. When it didn't work, I immediately realized what was happening. And I then just had to shift some Kerbals internally. So once again, luckily I brought the extra habitation module. Took Tim out of the lander. Note that I've packed Tim and Val for this mission because I need responsible Kerbals. Not Jeb and Bill and Bob, though Bill is now along for the ride. Okay, Tim back at the module and Bill now as passenger. And now we are ready to burn and start the landing on Eeloo, and then hopefully later conduct a rendezvous and head home. When we burn like this, I don't even watch the delta V. I normally just watch the angle of that line, and I do it visually on the picture in front of me. So here I am burning out well over 4,000 delta V in time warp. None of it changing my orbit in the least, except that last second when I switched over to 1x speed. Look at that, my orbital velocity is still over 2,600. What do? I go back to the map view. So now I'm not watching it, and every time I hit time warp, it immediately stops changing my velocity. Oh, there goes another 4,000 delta V. At this stage, I'm feeling something is wrong, but with an orbit like this, when you're looking at it visually and you just see that straight line, it's normal for the line to stay straight, and then suddenly curve around the planet. So you don't immediately pick it up. Now, I know something is wrong, and all I can think is that my orbit was too long. And I'd come way out, and I hadn't checked the speed, and I'd come in very, very fast. So at this stage I was still blaming myself, but this was not my fault. Now I was down to the lander. It was the only thing I had left. Orbital velocity still 2,600. By now it should be negative 5,000 or more. It took me a while to remember how to enable an engine. Something wasn't so good with the staging. And now the orbit is dropping, and there I switch into time warp again. But this one was strange because now it was reading, I think it was reading the wrong fuel, because not even the fuel was changing. I'm convinced in this case that the fuel was emptying because the fuel eventually ran out. But the orbital velocity wasn't changing, and this I now finally picked up. As soon as I time warped, the orbital velocity stopped changing. But now, looking at this display with fuel that's not moving, I had no clue what was going on. Eventually I did run out of fuel, and I staged, and that left me just with the last lander section. I've spent all the other fuel. There's no getting home from this point. And there I am, drifting in space with still 1,000 delta V to go. No point, well, 1,000 meters per second to go, and no delta V. No point in carrying on, so I reloaded to an earlier point in time. Now, I still suspected at this stage that my stupid orbit was to blame. The orbit was actually quite workable. Stupid, but quite workable. I decided to go for a more conventional approach of matching Eeloo's orbit somewhat. So that's what I then did. I boosted my Apo app out to the region of Eeloo, or Eeloo's orbit, and then started working things out from there. Okay, so now we've stepped back in time, so now we have the hydrogen engine on there again, the big ball. Don't worry about the no fuel, that just means staging is required in order to complete the burn. Unfortunately, I didn't yet know that the time warp was the main factor and the cause of all the disasters, so it's not like I was saying do not time warp under any circumstances. Then a weird thing happened, Bill's picture disappeared. And nothing I could do for the rest of the game would get Bill's picture back, either in the Kerbal Manager or in the little, what do you call that thing at the top? Seat allocation window. Seat status Kerbal position window. Anyway, that's not important. I can play the game without that window. Now it was a matter of getting a good intercept with Eeloo, and there you can see I've got it down to 190,000 kilometers from quite far out still. So then it was a matter of tuning the burn to get something closer to an intercept, and then once again just burning along the way, fine-tuning it until I could get a good intercept with Eeloo. At least my burns are producing thrust now and changing the orbit. Getting closer. Sounds like little frogs. This fine-tuning is important because I do not want to miss and have to go around again. And there we go. Intercept got. Now the fine-tuning, which is best done from that window where you can actually see the planet. You just watch that line. Don't trust the numbers. Watch the line. Try to tune it on that. Right, getting close to Eeloo again. Getting close to the Eeloo SOI. With fuel. That's a first. Okay, will we be able to slow down this time? Because we had fuel last time, we just didn't work. Okay, Eeloo, we're back. And I did put Bill on board again. And it was time to slow down. Note the orbital velocity now. Now only 927. And look at that. This stage alone still has 4,427 delta V. So things are looking up. I think by this stage I'd realized that I shouldn't be time warping. I apologize if there's a little bit of a break in continuity. I was recording this yesterday and I accidentally hit the stop recording button instead of the mute button when I needed to cough. And I lost all commentary after this point. So I'm picking up where I left off yesterday and hopefully without breaking continuity too much. So if I repeat myself or something like that, please excuse me. Hopefully I won't leave too much out. Okay, obviously the next part then is to lower my orbit around Eeloo. Things are still looking okay at this point. I have quite a lot of fuel. I never really worked out exactly how much delta V I needed to go out to Eeloo and back. I don't like to do those things, and yes, I know there's a little calculator for it, which I did use. But I don't bother with the exactness of that, especially since I was taking the big hydrogen ball with. I thought I would have plenty. I like to just overkill it. Hopefully I haven't spoken about this too much before, but when I went to the moon in my previous episode, I did encounter quite a problem with orbital degradement, with degrading orbits, even though I thought that had been fixed. It turns out it's still a problem, and I didn't know if it would affect me here at Eeloo. As you will see, it actually does play a role, but only under some circumstances. And initially I didn't pick it up. Initially it wasn't affecting me. Like now, you can see ApoApp is not changing, PeriApp is not changing. ApoApp's about 40,000 meters, PeriApp's about 25,000. I did try to get Bill back, or his picture back. He's there, he's just an empty picture, but nothing I did could make Bill reappear again, either in the Kerbal Manager window or in the little window up in the top right where you can make them go EVA and stuff. I don't know what that window is called. The Kerbal Viewer. Alright, with that, it was time to let Tim descend to the surface. Eeloo is quite craggy, so you want to avoid being in a canyon. Other than that, it's pretty much flat. The problem I've had visiting Eeloo in the past, I'd do an Eeloo mission if you dig through my old videos, is that it's very easy to go to the underworld. Apparently it's also very easy to forget that there is a button to extend all the legs at once, but I did eventually remember. The underworld, if you again search through my videos, is a KSP glitch whereby you fall through the surface to the underside of a planet, and I did it a few times under Kerbal Space Center itself back on Kerbin. I did videos about it on Lathe, and I visited it on Eeloo, and also on Bop, I think it was. Yes, when I flew the Millennium Falcon into the underworld. So I was hoping I wouldn't actually go to the underworld because it kind of makes life tricky. I just wanted to stay on the surface. And it turns out I was lucky on this run. No underworld visits, so maybe that is a thing which has now been fixed. However, there are some things which have clearly not been fixed. As I get lower now in altitude, so I get towards the area where the orbital decay starts. Have a look at the orbital decay happening there. You don't notice it because you're watching your altitude more, and the altitude does change, especially if you have it set to ground mode. And it's normal to have it fluctuating. But what shouldn't be happening is that your apoapsis and periapsis should be changing like that. That was affecting me to a great degree at this point because I was trying to overshoot the canyons, well, shoot past them, and then land. But because of the orbital decay, I wasn't going to go as far as what I thought I was. That left me in a predicament, and I had to then put down earlier than I wanted to in a not as flat area. Had I known just how not as flat it was, I would probably have boosted up again and moved beyond the canyons. While this looks fairly flat, as you will see very shortly, these slopes are actually quite considerable. Something else you may have noticed is that this lander has quite the offset to it. Like the big hydrogen ball attached to the rest of my rocket skew, or was an offset, so this lander has an offset between its two parts, but this lander has no excuse. This is a quite the fault on their part, since I built this as part of the rocket. It's one part. We didn't do any Apolloing where you take the lander off the command module and then rejoin. So this thing just shook itself sideways in transit. I can't say for sure, but I assume that means that the weight will shift and put it off center. And when you're landing on a slope, that makes things even worse. So poor old Tim C. Kerman has quite the challenge ahead of him now. Okay, Tim. We chose you for a reason. The reason being that you're not Bill or Bob or Jeb. I can only trust you and Val. All of the others are crazy. Come on, Tim. You can do this. Does Tim have the skill? 10 meters. Okay, what Tim forgot was to change out of retrograde mode and go into vertical. Bit late now, Tim. He also forgot to put the RCS on. So that's not on me, that's Tim's fault. Okay, Tim, slow this thing down. Put it down. Put it down. There we go. That's... No, wait, just... A little bit late on the RCS there, buddy. Well, it's landed. I mean, that's not what we wanted, but it's landed. You can see now just how steep the slope is. Not right where he is, but he's sort of on the edge of the cliff. Nice somersault, Tim. Very impressive. That's good work, buddy. I must give praise and credit where it's due. Whoever built this lander, and I don't mean me who assembled it, but the person who actually made the parts, man, you did a good job, because by rights these things should have exploded from the amount of punishment they took. But nothing even came off the lander at any stage. I would fully have expected those legs or those RCS thrusters to detach, or even the lander to separate in the middle, but it didn't. So, you know, sometimes the glitches and inaccuracies work in your favor. But you're still making a net loss. Alright, Tim is walking on the surface of Eeloo and not falling through it. Nice one, Tim. Plant a flag. Let's tell everyone what the state of KSP is now. This game is so broken. Broke in. I rest my case. Nice one, Tim. Nice. Good one. What I love about Eeloo is the ice cracking noises. Are the ice cracking noises? Noises, plural, but it is because we're speaking about them as one thing. Is or are the ice cracking noises? I don't know how realistic they are. I mean, yes, Eeloo has this really elliptical, irregular orbit, so it will move away from the sun and towards it, which will create gravity differences. But it doesn't have precipitation, really. So there shouldn't be much new ice forming. Not sure what's going on beneath the surface, but I can't imagine there's liquid water out there. I guess that depends on how big the core is, but it's a small world. There's no big moon to generate tides, so I'm not sure why we have such cracky noises. But hey, I like them, so why not? Tim, you finished running around. Time to go. Okay, you get back in the world's toughest lander and take it for a walk. I love the way the little legs just go up when they touch the ground. Looks like an animal walking. Or the world's strangest four-legged insect. Okay, Tim. We need to find a way to rejoin the command module in space and get home. Or at least attempt to. Are you just going to roll down the slope slowly? Okay, now here was another big me problem, or me fault. I'm looking at the command module, and it's spinning around the planet. but there's something critical I haven't noticed. And yeah, I really should have. I do wing it, and I enjoy winging it, but sometimes I really shouldn't wing it as much as I do. It would be better to have a checklist. Because I make faults by not noticing things. Okay, Tim is just relocating a bit. Trying to find some place where he won't roll down a slope. Tim, you need to go to the bottom of the crater, buddy. There's a lot of slope everywhere. Luckily, I packed Tim an anti-slope rolling tool. Some people call it a ladder, but it's an anti-slope rolling tool, or ASRT. Okay. Command module. On the other side of the planet. Come, OG, on the other side. You saw it when you went to that screen. Yes, far side, in the dark there. Okay, there we go. Command module, going around the world. Now, obviously, I want to meet up with the command module at the right time, so that the rendezvous is as easy as possible, and I use as little fuel as possible, and we have the best chance of getting back home. What I am not noticing is the direction of the orbit. It's clockwise. Normally, we orbit anti-clockwise when seen from the north, top down. I didn't notice that. That's a problem. Because standard procedure is you boost off from whichever planet or world you're on. You get into space and you head east because you're going with the direction of rotation. So it is much, much more efficient from a orbital mechanics point of view to go with the spin of the planet. And we always just go east. And our solar system is like that too. Unless you are on Venus, you just go east. So I went east. In addition to that, I didn't notice I was in target mode. I normally select the prograde marker for orbital. I selected it for target. That kind of just made things slightly worse, but it's okay. I at least picked up that I was not on the right trajectory and I went into manual, even though I was still in target. That's fine. At least I picked that up. What I didn't pick up was that I was now heading anti-clockwise around the planet and my command module was headed clockwise. Spot the upcoming disaster. Okay, why didn't I spot the upcoming disaster? Well, there is no indication of my orbit, and this is something I used to have in playing this game when I played it regularly. I see, unfortunately, that has not been fixed. Sometimes the orbital path just vanishes and you can't see where you have to go, and that makes life very difficult because now I'm trying to gauge my apoapsis by eye. My apoapsis, which you can see, is changing. Again, that should not be the case. So now I've realized that I have orbital decay. What I haven't realized yet is that I'm going the wrong way. So I have orbital decay, I'm going the wrong way, which I don't know yet, that part's my fault, and I have no indication of my orbital line. Now I realize I'm going one way, my command module is going the other way. Problem. If I may remind you, this thing has limited fuel. Very limited fuel. I mean, it's enough to get down and back up and rendezvous. It's not really enough to change direction if you happen to go the wrong way. Luckily, the orbital velocity of Eeloo is not that high. And my lander is in a fairly low orbit. Okay, but there's a problem with fairly low orbits. The orbital decay. I did manage to turn around and I did manage to get up to speed. Then something else I noticed, I was out of alignment with the orbit of my command module. And I'm not quite sure how that happened. I'll need to review all the game footage, but honestly, I don't really care. I don't know if I was at a really oblique orbit when I approached Eeloo. That's probably what happened. And I touched down and the planet rotated, and that put me out of sync with my command module. Normally you would cancel it out then by burning at the descending or ascending node, get your orbit right, but I couldn't do that. What I did do was run out of fuel. Luckily, I had RCS thrusters, and I had quite a lot of fuel with them, for them, which is hidden inside the module. When you have a very light craft like this, the RCS thrusters can make a substantial difference, and they can act as well as a small rocket motor any day. So, using my wisdom and experience and knowledge, I decided to fix my orbit with the RCS thrusters. Unfortunately, that put me into the orbital decay section again. Look at that periapsis. When that reaches 0, then we have problems again. Okay, but it's actually a bigger problem than that. It's not just a matter of crashing. You see, at the moment, I need to align orbits with the command module. I have no indication of my orbit. I don't know where the ascending and descending nodes are. I don't know exactly what the orbits look like relative to each other, and in case you didn't know, you basically have to overlay them to get things looking right before you get a good intercept, in most cases, unless you're trying a high delta V intercept, which is not something I could really do in this kind of case. So without those indications, it's exceedingly difficult to create a rendezvous. So what I did there was I boosted up to an altitude at which the orbital decay was no longer happening. But now, this module is out of fuel. The lander has no fuel left. So it is then all up to the main rocket with its command module to do the rendezvous. And it is not set up for it. It is not nearly as maneuverable as the lander. And without the indication of my orbit, now you can see the lander has an orbital indication, but the command module doesn't. There is just almost no way to do it. And at that stage, I just gave up. Because rendezvous, as you saw at the start of this mission, they are very tricky at the best of times and with everything that works. To do it with vessels that aren't even designed for it, with everything this broken, just not gonna happen. So that was the end of the Eeloo mission. Hope to see you again soon. OG out.